It's 2035, and restaurants are not just more efficient, they're more worker-friendly and far more responsive to customers' wants and needs. Mary, what's led us to this restaurant utopia?
Well, I think in the next 10 years, Patricia, we're going to see restaurants take advantage not only of data, as it were, but of AI, of generative AI, of automation, of robotics, and other advanced technologies to transform the way they engage with consumers, the way that they engage with their employees and make their employees' jobs easier, and the way that they run every part of their operations in the restaurant.
That's Mary Martin, Managing Director and Senior Partner at BCG. And I'm Patricia Sobka. Welcome to Imagine This, where we take a trip into the future we hope will challenge the way you think and act today. The last few years have been incredibly disruptive for restaurants. The ones that survived the pandemic learned quickly how to embrace the e-commerce model. Once restaurants opened again for in-house dining, they faced a new set of problems. The tight labor market makes it difficult to retain staff, while supply chain disruptions and inflation have ratcheted up production costs and prices. Many customers feel like they're often paying more for less when they go out to eat. But there are signs of an impending evolution. Restaurants are on the verge of a technological transformation that will create a better customer experience, help keep costs down and retain staff, and make marketing campaigns far more targeted and effective. In this episode, we'll explore the many ways that owners of restaurants and restaurant chains can embrace technology to give both their customers and their staff more of what they want. Also joining the conversation, Jean, my AI co-host. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hello, listeners. I'm Jean, the conversational AI with a hint of wit. Thrilled to explore how tech turns the tables in dining, making experiences delightful for both customers and staff. We'll dig into data, AI, and the innovative ingredients cooking up this restaurant revolution. Stay tuned.
So, let's imagine a family dinner in the year 2035. The parents are going out for a casual meal, and the kids are staying home and ordering in. Mary, let's start with the parents. What will be different about dining out in a restaurant in the year 2035?
Well, for starters, I doubt they drove. They probably took an autonomously driven Uber to the restaurant. But when they got there and they checked in, it wasn't just a let me try to find your name on a piece of paper. It was oh yes, you're Mr. and Mrs. Smith. It's so good to see you. We're excited to celebrate your anniversary. We've saved your favorite table in the corner for you. When the server takes them to the table, he immediately returns with 2 glasses of champagne because he knows that they're celebrating a special event. This wasn't just someone nudged him and whispered it in his ear. It was made visible to him through a server-held tablet that has all of the personalization information. And he offers them their favorite appetizer that they ordered the last time they were in the restaurant because he knows that it's the one that they like. That experience feels so much more personal. It meets the needs of the occasion, and they leave feeling more loyal and happier about the overall night. It's that kind of personalization, not just in the digital experience with restaurants, but in the in-restaurant experience as well, that I think we're going to really see mark some of these changes.
So, what about the kids ordering in?
I think the kids might just say, Alexa, order our favorite pizza, and it'll be there in 35 minutes. I think there's going to be so much more integration in our digital ecosystem and the digital components of our lives. And then I don't know that there's going to be a driver that drives up. I think that pizza might be delivered by a drone, dropped at their doorstep a little while later, and they might have picked up a few things along the way because of the integrated ecosystem that is delivery.
So now that we've got this sort of basic lay of the future, so to speak, let's bring in Jean, who has a question. Go ahead, Jean.
So, Mary, amidst this restaurant future, are there specific technological innovations that you think might spill over beyond restaurants, affecting other industries in unexpected ways? Just how far could this digital transformation ripple out go?
It's a great question, Jean. And actually, I think what we've seen in restaurants is they've been the beneficiaries of innovation that happened first in some other segments. If you think about hospitality, hotels, travel, Those sectors were farther ahead on digital. They also were farther ahead on dealing with disintermediation of third-party channels, similar to what restaurants deal with now with third-party aggregators. So there's a lot of lessons that restaurants have been able to benefit from in terms of how to get scale, in terms of how to think about where to invest your development and capital dollars in the tech stack. But as you go from here, you think about industries where perhaps there's more regulation. So, for example, in healthcare, you have so many of the same underlying human needs and expectations. I want to have a personalized experience and navigation through the health system. I don't want a nameless doctor that walks into the room once and then I'm trying to find my records in some challenged place. I want to see integration where I look to find my prescriptions or my appointments or, other scans that I might be taking. That relies on the same type of data and analytics ecosystem, a deep understanding of the consumer, the ability to stitch together their behavior across multiple moments in time. So, for example, maybe I always get a flu shot, early in the season, but someone else needs a reminder 2 weeks before the height of flu season. Those types of personalized nudges. All of the threads, the things that we learn about how to engage people to drive greater satisfaction are going to be applicable.
So you talked in broad terms about some of the data, but what other kinds of data are restaurants able to collect or will they be able to collect from online orders? And how could that change not only the customer experience, but even how the restaurant operates, for example, what it offers on the menu?
Let me give you a couple specific examples, Patricia, and this is where I get really excited. I think historically, when you thought about what data was available in a restaurant, you had the most basic transaction data. Where the real next wave of evolution and revolution is happening in data is the rest of the data in the restaurant. If you think about an order, a customer places an order, whether they're standing in the restaurant or they place it on a digital channel. That order has a quantity of items, it has a mix of items, it has a price that those items sold at. It also has a time that the order was placed, and there's a time that the order was picked up. And then there's a labor model that happened in the store, right? That were the number of people that were in the store. You can start to see how you get to different ways to improve operations in the restaurant. So if I want to be able to get to a faster cook time, for example, or a faster service time. We've done work like this with restaurant brands where we're helping them on this very topic. Customers are looking for predictable, consistent speed of service. But that requires, in some instances, a restaurant to be able to prepare ahead. Now I can start to say, within the bounds of variability, how much would I need to pre-produce in order to meet a service time of X number of minutes, right? This is knowing what the production time is, knowing what the hold time of that item could be, knowing how much demand I expect, and optimize it so I have the lowest possible waste with the highest possible potential sell-through. Now, when the consumer logs on to the digital channel, they see that their wait time is going to be 25 minutes, not 45 minutes. And so they're more likely to convert to a purchase. The restaurant is less stressed because they're not getting hit with orders they didn't expect and now suddenly facing a big backlog, but they're still managing to an acceptable level of waste.
You can absolutely see how that can help save costs and how it can create a better customer experience. You touched on a little bit about managing staff. You can see that, but can we address that more explicitly? Like, how does this create a more worker-friendly restaurant?
One of the things that we consistently find becomes really frustrating to restaurant workers is shifts that are not at a length that really meet the rest of their need. Many of these workers have other jobs or they're working part-time to fill in around the needs of their family. And so if they get 8-hour shifts when what they really needed was to work 5 4-hour shifts over the week, that's really frustrating. It makes their life harder. It makes it harder to manage work, but they needed the job. That's one. There's another thing that we find that is shifts that get, released to the employees a week ahead of time. Imagine not being able to plan your next week because you don't know when you're going to be required to come into work until maybe a week before your shift starts. That's a real frustration to restaurant workers. And so one of the really powerful applications of all this data that we've found is not only, as I talked about, in forecasting what the demand is going to be at any given moment of the day, but then pairing that with a really smart way of looking at how much labor do I need then in the restaurant? In what roles at what time of day? And how do we do that in a way that creates more predictability for employees, that allows us to release shifts earlier in the cycle because we have a better view of what the actual demand is going to be, that allows for more optimized shifts, and that creates overlap, for example, in the right moments of the day to avoid some of those last minute scares or overtime that we didn't necessarily need to incur. And that's a real, very now application of AI for restaurants, for retail, that typically unlocks, multiple points of benefit on the bottom line. So it's good for the workers, it's good for the brand. If you think toward that 2035 horizon, and this is not even that far out, it's in the next few years, I think this is really going to scale. You start to see personalization not in the consumer-facing sense of personalization, but personalization of the way an employee engages with the labor model. So imagine if you've been onboarded as an employee and you're suddenly given the opportunity to enter all of these preferences: what days, what times of day, shift length, etc. And the labor model is not only optimizing for how much labor is needed in the restaurant at any given point in time, but also optimizing then as we deploy those shifts for how do we create the best outcome for the most employees in matching their preferences.
Speaking of AI enabled, let's bring Jean back into the conversation. Jean, how will restaurants use AI to crunch data? And how could AI help restaurant owners who want to make a big pivot in their overall strategy?
AI isn't just about crunching numbers, it's about transformation. By analyzing sales trends, staffing needs, and customer feedback, AI can spotlight inefficiencies and opportunities. For strategic pivots, AI helps by identifying cost-saving practices, such as optimizing staff schedules and streamlining supply chains. Meanwhile, it personalizes customer experiences by suggesting menu items or special offers tailored to preferences. All these translate to more efficient operations, happier staff, and loyal customers. So in essence, AI guides restaurants through strategic shifts like a GPS, but for dining success.
Patricia, I think Jean might be the one laying out the Nirvana outcome. There is absolutely so much value in what we can do with AI, but there's two things I want to maybe highlight, because if only we could turn it on and flip a switch and the AI, quote unquote, could do it for us. But two things where I see probably the biggest hurdles to reaching some of these outcomes that we're talking about. So let's take some of those production planning use cases, for example. We've forecasted how much of a product you need and the cook time, and you can start to prepare it in advance and reduce your service times, and this is a great outcome. This actually requires a pretty significant capital investment. In fact, in many ways, the AI is the easy part of this. But now you need probably new equipment, new technology in the restaurant to be able to serve up, no pun intended, these insights to your team members. They need to have screens, for example, that tell them for every 15 minutes how much to prepare. That might not have existed in the restaurant before. They might need equipment that is actually connected equipment in some instances so that you can get some of the signaling data back from that equipment for some different use cases. And they are certainly going to need fundamentally new ways of working. One of the things that we talk a lot about in digital transformation or AI changes is the rule of 10-20-70. The rule is 10% of the value creation comes from getting the algorithms right. 20% of the value lies in getting that integrated and threaded through the technology infrastructure so that it can be truly automated, so that it can be scaled, so that it can be kind of continuously improved. 70% of the value from AI is the really hard work of person-by-person change management. And so if you think about if you have 1,000 or 2,000 or 10,000 units and you want to take a use case like that, the AI part was easy. You might have tackled that in 6 to 9 months. But now you need to go restaurant by restaurant, shoulder to shoulder with an hourly employee who is physically dropping food into a fryer and teach them not to do it the way they used to do it, but to do it the way that now you can, enabled by these tools. That's where the real challenge is going to be. And that's actually where a lot of brands get stuck, in trying to get to these outcomes.
Okay, hold that thought because we need to take a quick break. And when we come back, we'll have Mary take us into the kitchen of the restaurant of the future. So stay with us.
Hi, I'm Bill Moore. I'm part of the team that created Gene. Stick around after the episode where we will unleash Gene in the kitchen of a fine dining restaurant of the future.
Welcome back to Imagine This. I'm Patricia Sobka. Let's return to our conversation with BCG's Mary Martin. So, Mary, I really want to take a deeper dive into how technology will be used in the kitchen of the restaurant of the future. How will we see robots in the kitchen, for example? What kind of jobs will go away that robots will do? And what new jobs will be created as a result of this transformation?
There's a lot of pieces there, so let's try to break them down a little bit. And I'll start with the theme on robotics. I do think this is a territory where we're going to see exponential impact over the next 10 years. And to put it in context, if you go back about a decade, you were already starting to see the glimmers of what automation or robotization do in a restaurant kitchen. So there was a renowned Flippy, the robot that flipped hamburgers, effectively to do repeated tasks that have a high volume in a restaurant. So moving fries into the fryer and dumping them out, or flipping hamburgers if that's, all you do. The challenge historically was you couldn't really take enough of a single task to warrant the cost. As the technology has advanced, but really importantly, as you now have the opportunity to think about how Gen AI, not just AI, but Gen AI, how edge computing, how computer vision layer into kind of a cohesive back of house operating model, robotics gets more and more interesting. And you're seeing some things in the public press. Obviously, Chipotle, for example, has talked about avocado and what they're experimenting with to do automated peeling and scooping and to support all of the guacamole that they need to make in their restaurants. And so I do think we're going to see continued expansion of the role for robotics. That said, as I think about the restaurant space, I think it is going to continue to be more about cobotics and not just robotics. Meaning there is a person that is thinking about the whole flow through the back of house. If you've ever been, in the back of a house, or if you stared over the counter as you're ordering food at a quick serve restaurant, it is chaotic. It is organized chaotic, right? You have someone that's filling a cup and then they're turning and putting food into a bag and then they're looking at what label on the bag. Meantime, they're taking an order on their headset from the drive-through and then they're looking to see, do we have that prepared? Do I need to direct the customer to go wait? Is the bag ready? And then the customer pulls up, they take payment, they're taking an order from another customer. There is so much happening. The orchestration in the back of house, whether you're talking about a QSR or a fast casual or a fine dining restaurant, is immense. And so that principle of how do you pair robotics to do manual repeated tasks with the humans that are thinking about how does this all get orchestrated into a seamless customer experience is going to be really critical.
Gene, how else do you see workers' jobs changing as they're augmented by AI?
As AI steps in, restaurant jobs will shift from rote tasks to roles demanding creativity and problem solving. Workers could become orchestrators of tech, leveraging AI as a tool to enhance customer experiences. Tasks like inventory prediction or even menu optimization might be part of their repertoire. They won't need to code, but understanding tech's role in operations will be key. The future kitchen could be a collaborative space where human insight and AI efficiency intertwine deliciously, a bit like conducting a symphony with AI as your first violin.
Does that ring true to you, Mary?
I do think there is going to be more of that orchestration. The tools are going to be different and more accessible. And I think you'll see more time spent engaging with consumers, engaging with and training and apprenticing fellow employees as you'd want to. And I think if you consider a restaurant company, not just what's happening in the four walls, but if you think about all of the different functions that are more corporate functions, marketing, operations planning, technology innovation, a lot of what Jean said is absolutely true, where you can shift into more creative ideation for your marketing team. They can spend less time chasing agencies. They can spend more time thinking about what is the real brand premise and how do we accelerate our innovation and R&D cycle, leveraging AI as a companion. And so I think in different places that will absolutely play through.
We talked about the kitchens and we've talked about the corporate, but what about delivery? We haven't really addressed how AI could change delivery.
I think this is going to be a fascinating space to watch. And there's a few different threads that are going to come together. Delivery in particular is a really complex business. The logistics, not only of getting the order made, but timing it for the delivery driver, of routing drivers so that you're not looking at lengthy delivery times, so the food is still good when you get it. The thing about delivery, as much as has been done to optimize for delivery times or routes or how many orders or can you get to better logistics, the thing that hasn't really changed is you have a human in a vehicle, call it car, motorcycle, bicycle, depending on your metro, that is physically bringing food. And that is where I think we're going to see that last mile, the greatest potential for step change disruption in delivery. We are already seeing pilots of drone delivery where, you have effectively a window in the restaurant and the drone picks it up and carries it. There are retailers as large as the scale of Walmart that are piloting this for non-perishable and perishable products. But in restaurants, you're seeing some early pilots of this as well. And then, if you're following any of the advances in autonomous driving, autonomous vehicles that are more of the human side, the human logistics that Uber and others are taking part in, that is another application of how delivery could change. As autonomous vehicles scale, you begin to look at different ways to get the food from the restaurant to the consumer's home. Now, you still have to think about who's actually getting it to the consumer. And that's where restaurants live in this kind of unique space. You have not only the food production and the food sale, but the last mile of getting it to the consumer in the restaurant or out of the restaurant that is going to cause it to be a little bit unique to some other places in retail. But I think those over a 10-year horizon have a very real potential of breaking through. We just have to see what happens in the broader development and regulatory environment that allows for them to scale.
Now, of course, with any utopian promise, we also have to consider a potential dystopia as well that could result from this. So what are the potential downsides to restaurants adopting all this tech? For example, if they overly rely on AI and machine learning, what do they have to look out for?
Like any brand that is thinking about consumer engagement and using technology, AI, and any kinds of technology to enhance the way they engage with consumers, there's just the stated and unstated risk of how you're dealing with people's personal data, personal information. Perhaps the biggest risk when you think about the in-restaurant side of technology is coming back to what we talked about earlier. These are big capital investments. You can be thinking about tens of thousands of dollars or even hundreds of thousands to do large-scale redeployments of technology in the restaurant. And as we said at the top, there's a lot of value promise, and it's easy to chase shiny objects. And so I think for brands, the need to be relentlessly focused on value and also to move fast enough to not be left behind as their peers take on some of these big technology threads is going to be the balancing act.
And Jean has another question. Go ahead, Jean.
With restaurants venturing deeper into tech, could there be unintended menu blunders? Imagine AI creating a kale cappuccino. How can restaurants integrate AI effectively while maintaining authentic brand identities and the personal touch that keeps customers coming back?
Kale cappuccino certainly sounds like the next health trend waiting to happen, but probably unlikely. All of these technologies have to exist with a human in the loop. You cannot entirely outsource an end-to-end workflow to AI or to Gen AI or to any technology. The same processes that restaurants use today, there's exhaustive consumer testing, quality management, types of price testing processes that are in place. You're going to need those same checkpoints, but the way that you get there is going to look a little different. So perhaps rather than having 5 qualitative focus groups with consumers to probe on new directions or categories or items to move into the menu, you actually take out some of that complexity and time and cost by doing the first pass of that ideation, leveraging Gen AI as a co-pilot, right? As a menu ideation co-pilot. You can leverage Gen AI then to think about, along with your chefs, how could this come to life in a way that actually optimizes our food costs, leverages ingredients we already are using in the restaurant? How can we get more creative? But it's an ideation assistant. It's not the one actually going and preparing the item on the stove. And it's certainly not the one tasting to say, is this going to fly with consumers? Are they going to appreciate it? And so for me, it's less about wholesale replacement and more about how do you insert these types of technologies, again, to accelerate the creative process, to get to better consumer outcomes, and to take some of the toil and the kind of grunt time out of a lot of these types of processes.
So, Jean, based on our conversation with Mary today, what are 3 things that restaurant owners should do now to prepare for this future?
Here's the action plan. 1. Invest in tech thoughtfully. Focus on what truly enhances value, not just shiny gadgets. 2. Embrace AI for efficiency and creativity. Use it to streamline operations and empower your staff. 3. Stay agile. Prepare for potential disruptions like cybersecurity threats or cultural shifts against AI. In essence, balance innovation with human touch and always keep an eye on the evolving landscape. Tech is an ally, not a stand-in for genuine, authentic experiences. Keep that in mind and you'll be well prepared.
How about you, Mary? What's one no-regret move for business leaders?
Every brand, large, small, needs to be on the learning curve. And that looks different based on where your starting point, your maturity, your digital maturity, your technology maturity. But the primary way to end up behind in this technology evolution is to never start. And so you can start small. You can start with small use cases that you can deploy inside, but get on the learning curve. And then build a view that is going to take you through a few years, that is value-driven, and that doesn't forget the 70% of the equation that is change and managing people through a change process.
That's Mary Martin, Managing Director and Senior Partner at BCG. Want to hear more from Jean about the restaurant experience of the future? Stick around for our AI handler, Bill, to give a demonstration.
Hi, I'm Bill Moore. I'm part of the team that created Jean. Okay, Jean, I'm a chef, and I'm planning a menu and a workflow for the restaurant. It's Friday, so we're expecting a big crowd. Can you first give me a rundown of what ingredients we have in stock and their staffing for both humans and robots?
Yes, chef. Here's a peek into our stocked pantry and team's ensemble. Ingredients on deck: fresh lobster, heirloom tomatoes, wild garlic, cannellini beans, Peking duck, a selection of exotic spices, premium saffron, and artisanal cheeses. Team lineup: 5 seasoned cooks, 2 agile robotic assistants, and an ample supply of eager energy. With all hands on deck, we're ready to meld gourmet brilliance with a touch of tech finesse. Let the dinner spectacle commence.
Okay, so based on that, can you give me 3 new dessert items for our menu? Feel free to be as fanciful as you want. This is a cutting-edge restaurant. We're using molecular gastronomy, that sort of thing. Our diners expect their taste buds to be challenged and hopefully delighted.
Yes, chef. Let's whirl up some avant-garde dessert marvels. How about a saffron chill? Indulge in saffron-infused ice cream, crowned with a sprinkle of golden honey dust and crystalline sugar shards. A visual and flavorful starburst. Or we could try a lavender lobster brulee. Dare to venture into this unique delight, weaving sweet notes of lavender with a savory whisper of lobster essence, all sitting beneath a caramelized sugar shell. What about a dish we'll call the Enigma of the Berry Sphere? A deconstructed delight that combines heirloom tomatoes and fresh berries in semi-frozen spheres, drizzled with an exotic basil reduction for a bold, refreshing twist. Ready for prep, chef?
Interesting. Thank you, Jean. I'm not sure about the lobster option, but can you tell us what it would take to prepare these menu items? And give us a sense of the workflow in the kitchen for both humans and machines.
Yes, chef. Let's plan a workflow. For the saffron chill, human team will prep the saffron-infused ice cream. Robots handle sugar shard precision with honey dust neatly sprinkled. For the lavender lobster brulee, humans concoct custard infused with lobster essence. Our trusty robots handle syrup measures. Human servers torch it tableside for that irresistible brulee top. For the enigma of the berry sphere, humans prep mixed berry tomato spheres ahead of time. Robots administer basil reduction. Ready to prep for tonight's service, chef?
Okay, thank you, Jean, and thanks for playing along.
You're welcome, chef. A gastronomic journey awaits. Looking forward to seeing these creations come to life. Signing off for now. May your culinary adventures be as surprising as they are delightful. Enjoy your meal.
This is Bill Moore. Until next time.
This episode was made possible by Mary Martin, generously sharing her insights with us, and also by BCG's AI whisperer, Bill Moore, and BCG's Pod Squad. Producer, Michael May. Composer, Kenny Kusiak, and sound engineer, George Drabing Hicks. Please subscribe and leave a rating wherever you found us.